Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about the job. I want to talk to you about the job of doing concept art or doing art for games, doing art specifically for mobile games. This is a job that is really kind of an exact demonstration of what is kind of expected if you were to, say for instance, work for Aquatic Moon, my art house. We're doing a job for a company that's making a game called Cannonballers. This is an example of one of the tasks that would be done. This is an example of a task that some of the guys that I'm working with actually did a pass on, and I'm going to be addressing some of that through feedback. And I thought it'd be good to open the door a little bit and invite you guys into my studio, and we're going to go over the task itself. This one might be a little bit long, but I am going to speed it up where it gets just through the boring parts, all the rendering stuff, but I want to take you through the thought process on the key points. So let's do it. Let's make some Cannonballers power-ups. So we've got some pieces started here. This is a list, of course, of the task. Usually what I'll do is I'll put my task details or information if the client had feedback or something like that. I'll put it in text within the Photoshop file and, of course, keep that on an upper layer. So that it's not in the way, but it's a focal point. Like if you're doing something that doesn't address the feedback or address the task at hand, then it's pointless. So don't do it. Don't waste your time on things that are outside of this unless if it says explore something else at the bottom of the list. So a lot of the sketches that you're seeing here, these color sketches, are designs that were done either by one of my assistants, Danny, Doman, or Justin. And some of these are already working pretty well. In some cases, they're not. And we're going to go over what works and why it works and what doesn't work. In this case, this is a screenshot of the game. So we know that the camera angle is always going to be at this angle because it's 2D. And so every asset that we make has to look good at the same angle as everything here. In fact, I think it would be valuable to pull up some other assets, such as structures, so that we can see when an asset looks like it might be out of place next to other assets. These are some other assets that we've designed for Cannonballers as well. As you can see, it's a very Zelda kind of a style of camera angle. No shame in that. Zelda is one of the greatest games ever made, Link to the Past. So not a bad idea to pull inspiration from the best if you're going to do it. So what I do is I start out by kind of creating these sort of guidelines. Like I know that those angles of objects are going to work. So for instance, I've created this little red outline of a kind of a prop because I know that I need for all of my props to work at that angle. And that's not all that dissimilar from, say, for instance, doing this as well. Let's take that same red. We're just going to do on a new layer. I'm going to do like a outline so that I can evaluate the angle that everything's at. Now, it's not quite top down. There's just a slight angle to things. And this isn't going to be perfect, but it's enough for a guideline. And none of our objects are this size, but we need to make sure that our perspective is met with every single piece. And you'll see once we do this, you'll see why some of these props aren't working. So what we'll do is we'll isolate which ones are and which ones are not. These power-ups need to look good when they're placed here. So when we take, for instance, when we take that object and we place it here, aside from scale, the perspective is going to match. It's going to look like it fits in that world. It's not going to look like it's too top down, and it's not going to look too side view. So that's what we're watching for, actually. So let's find out. Let's find out which objects are going to fit the angle. Now this one, I suspect probably will, because it's pretty close to the angle of this object. Yeah, see, that doesn't look too bad. We probably could taper in the bottom just a hair using the transform tool and make it a little squat to counter that. So that doesn't look too bad. So here we have an example of an object that pretty much, oops, That one is approved. So I'm going to put that on another layer, and I'm going to create a folder for these that are fixed. So I've created a folder that says fixed, and I'm going to go ahead and delete the old one that was not fixed. The other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that these are on a background layer, these backgrounds, because I don't want to accidentally paste something into the same layer if I need to be able to cut it out. Because we're working with alpha channels here. You'll notice that this object now it could be placed anywhere. And this will look especially good when you go in and add like a shadow, for instance. And I'll just kind of mock one up real quick. Let's say that I've got a layer underneath. And then let's grab our shadow color using a soft airbrush. And let's put that underneath the object. And you'll notice how now it kind of feels like it would fit into that environment a little bit. Let's make our shadow a little smaller. Now that has to be on a separate layer though, because the object itself might not always be on that background, or it might need a different shadow color. But it makes it a lot more convincing when it's at the same angle and it has a little bit of a shadow. If that shadow were lower, it would feel like it's like hovering a little bit, like you see with the cannonball here, things like that. So we've got our approved, our fixed little electrical dealio. Let's kind of put that back up in the corner here. That's A. Now let's go down to the next one. We're going to go down the line and we're going to pick out a few that don't. Now this one, you'll notice, is actually at a very different angle than this one. So what can we do? Let's see how it looks in the scene. How does it look when we put it onto the platform? Well, it looks a little bit flat. It looks a little straight on. It doesn't look like it matches the same angle, nor does it match the angle of our guide here, right? So what can we do? Well, there are a number of tricks and techniques that we can use. Let's go ahead and dig into those. First of all, let me get rid of this one so that we've got a little room to work with here. Layer management's a whole different thing, and that's a topic for another time, I think. So one of the things we can do is we can go up here to the transform warp tool, and with this we can start to warp it, and that'll get us part of the way there. It won't quite get us all the way there, but it will get us part of the way there. You can grab these pinch points to give it a little bit of a squeeze. I recommend if you're not understanding how this is working, how the form is wrapping around, I suggest you go and do some of the easy art lessons tutorials that I've done where we draw cylinders and barrels and we place them into perspective. So this is a little bit more of a kind of an advanced tutorial in the sense that it assumes that you have a basic understanding of how perspective works. So you'll notice that by moving this ball point, this ball-shaped thing, a little bit more down and getting this curvature in this curve and matching that pretty closely, we're going to immediately start to notice that it feels a little bit more like the top-down angle that we're going for the rest of the assets in our game. And this is a big challenge, especially when you get into doing characters. And I mean, it's such a challenge that I got to say, I mean, we've been working on this game for about a year, well, about 9 months. And despite that, we still run into challenges with some of our assets looking a little too flat, a little too straight on. Because it's always tempting to show more of the front, and if you're not constantly weighing it against the setting, the environment that it's placed in, the context in which it's used, then you might not realize that it doesn't fit. Now I'm going to show you a quick cheat here. With a lot of these symmetrical objects, you could just use the symmetry tool, but what I'm going to do is copy it, transform, flip horizontal. And that ensures that it's exactly the same on both sides. Now, it looks a lot more like the angle of the game. Let's put it down on the platform and see if it's more convincing. Yeah, that immediately looks like it fits into the world a little bit more. Notice that the line thicknesses are the same line thicknesses as the things around it. Our props and objects usually have a little bit less detail than some of our background elements. So this one, I think, is approved. Let's put it in our fixed folder. I'm going to go ahead and time-lapse a little bit as I go ahead and work on converting some of the assets that are a little bit closer to the camera angle that we're aiming for. So obviously this is time-lapsed a little bit. I've sped it up probably about maybe 5 times. And what you're seeing me do here is pretty much, I mean, the reason I sped it up was because you pretty much watched me do, exactly that process with a couple of other assets earlier in the video. But I wanted to show you just how I'm applying that to multiple different types of assets. We've got a little canister of pink fluid or purple fluid. We've got this jar here. I wanted to make sure that that top edge had just a little bit more of a highlight so that it popped out just a little bit more. You can use contrast to really pop out specific objects, and things like power-ups should pop out just a little bit. So one of the things that we have to pay attention to here is that the line quality on the edge of this doesn't quite match consistently, and we need to make sure that all of our outer lines, our edges on our power-ups and all of our props as well, anything that needs to stand out needs to have the same line density and line contrast. So I'm literally color dabbing from the sort of source, the first one that was approved, and just making sure that they're all kind of holding the same line weight and the same contrast, color contrast and value contrast, so that they stand out equally. So it won't look like this is in the background or anything like that. And I think here we can see where this one feels like it's a little too thin as well. So let's bulk that up a little bit too. Now, keep in mind those lines will have to get thicker if we shrink the object. So as you can see, we've got some that are working pretty well here. Some of these are working very well. And then there are a few of them that are just really off. For instance, let's look at this one. This one here, I think if you're paying attention, you already know why this don't work. In fact, let's carry it over. Let's copy and paste it, or we'll cut it out, and we'll carry it over and put it up on that deck of the ship. Now, how does that look? Does that look like a power-up? Does it look like it fits into the perspective or angle of the world? No. This is like, what are you thinking, buddy? Come on. So what we got to do is we got to try to fit it into the angle of the world, and that means we can look at this. We can say, all right, let's do more of a top-down. Let's see, is that going to look okay? I mean, it's going to be closer, especially if we do something like this, where we give it a little bit of vertical depth. That's one way to do it. That's one solution. So let's yeah, and I think it will work. So let's go ahead and do that. The best way to do it is, as you just kind of saw, I'm going to duplicate. I hold down Option and Command to create a duplicate. And then, of course, the one in the front is actually going to be a little bit slightly bigger to meet the perspective, because we've got these lines that aren't perfectly vertical. They come in just a little bit at the top, so it kind of creates, it'll look, you'll see what I mean when I get to the point where we're placing it into the town. But now we've also got where the top here is going to have all this highlight from that side, and then this side is going to have a little, well, let's just go ahead and fill that whole thing in. You see how now we see our top side of our object. This is going to be in shadow, the darker area within. The darkness within. What? This just became a whole different kind of video. And then let's not deal too much with calculating shadows just yet, other than that we want to imply that that's got some depth to it. And then this side is going to be shadowed as well. We don't want to go as dark as that because it's gold. And watch some of my tutorials on material rendering if you're interested in improving your material rendering for things like gold and shiny surfaces. That's a challenge. That's a tricky one. Let's make sure that that line is in there so that it reads as its own triangle. And you can see how immediately our object begins to feel like it's got some depth to it. Not much, but enough. Enough of a depth. So it's just roughed in now. Let's see, how does that look? Let's mash it down. How does that look when we place it in the scene? Well, it looks like a stack of bricks. Like angled bricks. Yes, this is definitely intended to look like a Triforce kind of a thing. That was my intention. But is it... It doesn't look like an exact Triforce. So, yeah, actually, that could be something very interesting. Let's go ahead and pursue it. Let's go ahead and paint it in a little bit more. Now, if we're looking down at it, this area between here and here is going to be a little bit longer than the area between here and here. So let's go ahead and add just a hair of perspective, a little bit more perspective to this to really sell the idea. Okay, now it's just a matter of cleaning it up and making sure that it matches the rest of the power-ups. Remember, we've got to get our line thickness consistent across all of our power-ups, so it's okay if these get a little bit thicker here. And let's move this over to next to our other props so that we can really, or our other power-ups, so that we can really make sure that we're hitting that style mark, that it's matching. And you'll notice this one had to be a little bit smaller just to fit on that platform. Now we want to really punch the shine on this, so we're not going to go quite to like full bright specular with that, but just enough that it stands out. And this is just the particular art style of this project. I mean, sometimes we're working on something that's, you know, dark Gothic style and, you know, like a Diablo, or sometimes we're working on something that's like bright and colorful, like Indivisible or something like that. We did a lot of environment concept for Indivisible. Sometimes we're working on something that's very cartoon shaded and anime like Overwatch. We do a lot of concept art for Overwatch. And in every one of those cases, they all have different rules for their art style. And if you want to be an employed artist, if you want to be working on these kind of games, you have to be able to match the art style of the game that you're working on. And they don't want to teach you this stuff. The reason why my studio, Aquatic Moon, gets so much work is because we are so diverse. We can handle photo bashing. We could be working on Call of Duty one day, and we could be working on Overwatch or League of Legends or something the next day. Nothing is out of our reach because all we have to do is have a sample image, and we can emulate the art style, the style of rendering from that game. So we'll never run out of work. If you want to be a professional artist working for these companies, you need to be able to do that, which means a lot of training, a lot of hardcore nose to the grindstone skill building, like hardcore skill building. And that's why I do things like my box sets of tutorials. That's why I do things like workshops. And this process is a totally different way of thinking than if you're making something that is your own. If you're doing your own thing, build your brand. Stick to your style, your one style. I got friends that have drawn in the same art style for 20 years and they're legendary now because they've spent 20 years building their brand. But would they hire that guy on something like a Diablo? Probably not. Unless if that's already his art style, like Braum. Braum just happened to already be the guy that the Diablo team was looking at and going, hey, we need to make it look like his stuff. So then they went to him and said, hey, could we pay you to do stuff for us? And he said, yeah. So he did a bunch of key art pieces for it. But If you want to make money doing this stuff and not take that risk, then I suggest you learn how to paint in every which art style that you possibly can. Be diversified. Be a chameleon. Blend in anywhere you go. So here we go. We've got one asset in the art style of Cannonballers. Let's make sure that that goes into the fixed folder. And let's place it somewhere like here, just for now. We'll clean all that up a little bit more later. Ooh, this one is probably already good to go. Let's make sure that our fixed layer is all on one with opacity so that we can place those objects into the world. And ooh, look, check it out. Just about everything works. You could scale it down or scale it up and it'll still fit anywhere in the world. Now these will probably very likely get shrunk down, but for purposes of how they'll look on deck, we need them a larger version anyway. So that's why we have those. Okay, let's keep going. Let's jam. This is a day in the life, brother. This is what it's like to be working on Cannonballers every day. And for my part, what I do a lot of is what you're seeing me do right now, which is going in and making sure that assets are matching the game style, the direction. So I'm doing a lot of paint overs, a lot of style analyzing, a lot of breakdowns, and a lot of emailing to make sure that the artists that I'm working with are all on the same page, that we're all meeting the same goals. And sometimes I'll even do videos exactly like the one that you're watching right now for one of the artists. In fact, I am going to send this video exactly to some of the guys that I'm working on this project to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're all meeting the same artistic goals and the same stylistic goals, the same perspective. Every asset needs to look like it was done by one artist, because if it looks out of place, the viewer's going to know it, the player's going to know it, and it'll feel weird to them. Now let's look at some more that aren't working. This one right here, it's pretty obvious. Oh, first of all, let's make sure that our acorn gets into our fixed layer, because that one was already primo, tip top. This one has the opposite problem, ironically, than the Triforce had. You'll notice. The problem is that it's too angled. Now, what do I mean? Now look at it next to other assets. Let's look at it next to our source barrel. Well, that doesn't look like it's at the same angle. Can we fix it? Yeah, we can. But we don't really need to, because we already have a barrel. We already have a barrel from our source file. Now, this is a source file that I keep that has every prop that we've painted for the game up to this point. I also have one for characters as well. And this keeps everything in the same perspective, and it keeps everything looking like how it's going to look relative to each other. So let's go back. We drop in our barrel. Ah, see how different that looks? It's way off. Even the color of the wood is way off. So we're constantly evaluating our progress in the context of our game looks like. You see here where I can just grab a couple of pieces, and that barrel is matching the perspective of the game. So it's a one-to-one combination. Oh, that's got to be on a new layer.
The layer management in Photoshop is hands down the most useful, effective thing about it. I mean, being able to manipulate an object with transparency on a layer above everything else without affecting the thing below it is kind of essential. Most any respectable digital drawing software has layer management capability.
Let's see if we can get our TNT to wrap a little bit more around. Transform, warp, using our warp tool. This time we're going the other direction. A little less curvature on it would be good. It's also too small. So maybe it's not bad, actually. But that's how you know that the other barrel was just way out of perspective, when you can just put it right onto a barrel that's at a different perspective. And we're going to have to erase out. Let's increase the contrast to get it to match a little bit more. Really get that TNT to stand out. Let's do another warp pass on it. transform, warp. Just a little bit. More important than anything is the readability of it, you know. So we're just trying to massage it to make sure that it feels a little less jarring. And it could be better. We could do a better mapping of that, wrapping it around, but this is good enough. I think it's overall still a more of an improvement. I'm not even entirely sure that we're going to use this barrel because there's already other explosive barrels that we have. Let's shrink it down just a little bit. So see how it looks on the deck. That's nice. Not too bad. Our wood color is a little off. Just a hair. So let's go ahead and try to adjust that using image adjustments, replace color. And then we select our brown that we have, and let's just desaturate it a little bit. Just a hair. And maybe bring it a little bit more towards the purple side. Now, admittedly, this barrel specifically doesn't stand out as much as I might like when it's, you know, sitting on a brown deck. So let's increase the contrast just a hair. All right. Not bad. I'll take it. I consider that an improvement over the previous TNT barrel. And the scale is a little bit closer as well. All right, let's. I'm going to go into time lapse again, and I'm going to jam out a few more here to just make some progress on this.
Wow, this is rapidly becoming my meatiest video in some time. This is a lot more like the kind of stuff that I do at my workshops. This is a lot more of the kind of stuff that pretty much you see me doing. I mean, this is my day-to-day. Also, I mean, it's not as glamorized, and I think that's probably why I don't expect it to get a ton of views or anything like that. It's really just that I want to be as effective as I can with this one. That was why I decided to record this one. It's also, it happens to be what I'm working on, so two birds with one stone. Ludi Games is a bit of an anomaly in this regard. They're okay with us showing the progress as we're developing it, and I do want to encourage you to go check it out over at ludi.games.com and sign up. You can play it actually now. But most of your clients will not allow that. Most clients are going to say, hey, this has got to kind of be top secret for a good chunk of time. Sometimes you don't get to show something for 2 years, and sometimes they don't want you to show it at all. That's just part of that job. But Ludi Games is exceptional in that way, and I'm very grateful to them. So there you have it. That's sort of a day in the life of working on Cannonballers and creating power-ups. I did pass this off to Justin, and as you can see, he added a couple of them there at the bottom, fixed them up, and they look tidy. They look like they'll fit right in game. If you like my art style and you would like to learn from me, I do, of course, make all of my brushes available, and, of course, all of my tutorials available in my box sets of tutorials. Or if you're more just into the freebies, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel here, and I update about once or twice a week right now. I'm trying to do a little bit more. I also stream over on Twitch. You can find all that in the text field below the video as well. And dudes, until next time, I'll catch you mañana. Bon, ciao, baby. Yeah.